Well,
We're
so
interested.
we have this thing called the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. It was set up initially to fight ISIS.
This is the Jews.
Because in 2014, 2015, when the Obama administration was trying to put military boots on the ground in Syria, there was this sort of giant threat that was publicly talked about all over about ISIS recruiting on Facebook and Twitter. Homegrown ISIS threats, for example.
Do you guys remember those stories? Oh, they call it local terrorist threats. Even here, we had the same narrative. You remember when we had some explosions and the attacks. You remember? What I believe is that they actually cause those attacks so that they can escalate the issue. When you guys are not like, you don't think it's serious, have something. Then all of a sudden, all of you are compliant. Hey, save us! The army, GSU, where are you?
Arlen, Texas fiasco where there was a shooting by a ISIS terrorist, and the web of online intrigues around that. 3 years later, it would come out that he had been effectively groomed by the FBI. The FBI had paid someone over $100,000 to become his best friend and text him to tear up Texas before that. But never mind, the horse was out of the barn.
Like they play that long game. They used to actually radicalize. Like the CIA, FBI would go and radicalize people. They do psychological assessments of the person. They collect your online data. They know this person is very close. We just need to give him a little push. Then he can do what we want. Even if you look at the people that attempted to assassinate Trump these last campaigns, most of them, they just disappear. They had an online presence. You can't find it. They just you see them there. They're on all these different CIA trainings and whatnot. Then they just disappear. Then they just keep quiet. Have you ever guys had an assassination attempt on an influential person, and then the media just keeps quiet? It goes on for 2-3 days, then they just keep quiet. Nobody's saying anything about those. I know most of you have forgotten about it, but that is part of it.
This idea that ISIS was recruiting on Facebook and Twitter gave a license to the State Department to create this thing called the Global Engagement Center, which was really the first official censorship capacity in the U.S. government. It predated the DHS stuff that would come along in the Trump era, and this gave the State Department the direct back channel, the direct coordinating capacity with all the social media companies to tell them about ISIS accounts, ISIS narratives that were trending. The Pentagon poured hundreds of millions of dollars into developing a technique called natural language processing, which is a way to use AI to scan the entire internet for keywords. And you would have these academic researchers effectively constructing code books of language. What do ISIS advocates or supporters talk like? What words do they use? What prefixes and suffixes? This whole lexicon is then conjoined with the ingested sum of all of their tweets and transcribed YouTube videos and Facebook posts, and then suddenly the State Department is a real-time heat map of everyone who is likely to be or hits a certain confidence level of being suspected to support ISIS.
Listen to that. The information is so thoroughly collected. Your Facebook posts, what you watch, what you put up, what you like. Even sometimes on our devices actually, they do record. So if it's Google, if it's iPhone, whatever, they record. iPhone is a bit more stringent. They don't really give that back end. At least that's my understanding at the moment. But they are able to collect all this information and form, how do I say, a psychological profile of who you are. And then they would try and find out, okay, now who can be nudged? Or who is capable of. And then they give you assistance without really straight on to make sure you come to that particular point to give them what they want. So if you are somebody who's radicalized and you go and attack a place, then they can ramp up the laws now. No, they can say, you see now the terrorism comes from Facebook, and they met on Facebook and they did this, that, and that. They met on TikTok, and then so we must ban TikTok, we must ban Facebook. Otherwise, Facebook, you must give us back end so as to check. So that's how it works.
That was 2014 to 2016. set up by this guy Rick Stengel, who described himself as
He
Obama's
has the
propagandist
details.
in
Go
chief.
check who that
He's
Stengel
now on the advisory board of
fellow
NewsGuard, one of the
is.
largest censorship mercenary firms in the world. But he described himself as a free speech maximalist because before he started this, he was the Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. He started this censorship center. He was the former managing editor of Time magazine. And so he's talked about how he used to be a free speech maximalist back when he was in the media, and media companies benefited from that. But when Trump won the election in 2016, he became convinced that actually the First Amendment was a mistake. He actually openly
Free
advocated in
speech.
the Washington Post in an op-ed that we effectively end the First Amendment, that we copycat Europe's laws. And then he wrote a whole book on it. This is the guy who started effectively.
You see, like locally, we have people going to court for Facebook posts. That should be against the law. You see, those are politicians trying to put pressure so that they are not criticized. Even whatever rubbish they are up to, you're not supposed to criticize them. And that's what that is. You've seen a few people here locally betraying that. All those things are borrowed from this CIA USAID Manenos. That's why you're seeing like the guy, like all of a sudden we have so many like it's so rubbish. So like it's the most weird thing, especially when these AI images of the president in a coffin and what were coming around. His reaction actually showed me the kind of person he is, like really fragile. Ego is fragile as hell. And that it's like it's one of the weirdest things. Like he's throwing a tantrum over that, really? Like you're at the top there, but that is what bothers you. Like that is so pathetic, man.
The country's first censorship center. But then they did a really cute trick. They went from counterterrorism to counterpopulism. Now, we've always had this ability since the 1940s to interfere in the domestic affairs of foreign governments or foreign countries.
Yeah, now you know.
To topple communist countries. This was the whole cold.
I believe that was they are using that as pretext. That we are fighting communism or whatever. Countries that are communist, so or maybe it was legit. Then it just spilled over to these other things.
Cold War counter-communism work of the CIA and the State Department, but that was primarily targeting left-wing communists or left-wing socialists or left-wing populist-run countries. When Trump won the election in 2016, this was one of the reasons I think Republicans were so slow to move on all this. They had never experienced the brunt of the intelligence state against the mainline GOP, or at least the in-power Trump faction of the GOP, in the way that Democrats did.
And it was really Republicans because the Democrats were in the game. They were down. Whatever was happening, they were signing off on it. So it's just, I found that so weird, man. Like, these are the people always told. When you're growing up, you've been told Democrats, the good people fighting for the poor people. All that was just a game. It was just branding to PR to, but they were not at all. At all. But you know, most of you are in that soup, so you can't get out. I've seen a lot of Kenyans in diaspora walk in a ball. They all get there, then they start pretending, the white supremacy, rudi kwenu bas.
In the 1960s and 70s, when the CIA was actively interfering in Democrat Party politics to try to tilt them away from the anti-Vietnam movement and more into the sort of limousine liberal international interventionalist neoliberal camp. And so in 2016, the Global Engagement Center pivoted from being counterterrorism to counterpopulism, arguing that right-wing populist governments, it wasn't just right-wing, they were also against left-wing populists, but they simply never rose to power in the way that...
Yeah, because the leftist ideals are pathetic. They're some of the worst ideas. They're not practical. So these bleeding hearts people. They're not practical. They want free this, free that, free the other thing. They think the world is just like, we need to stop and give. They don't realize that part of the human essence is being able to earn your keep. That's part of it. Let me just add some philosophy. To earn your keep. That's part of the human essence that makes you really, like, if you really want to really enjoy your life, you must be able to go through that strive to build something. And, that is what I think maybe it's just me, but it gives me so much satisfaction in that when I'm doing that. And as far as I'm concerned, that is the way to go. But that was just a little
Trump did in the
side
U.S., Bolsonaro did in
segue.
Brazil, Matteo Salvini did in Italy, Marine Le Pen almost did in France, Nigel Farage.
She should have won. She won that, but France is a very corrupt country. Hey, France is very corrupt. Wow. I've watched like their last 2-3 elections. And oh, by the way, you guys should go watch this lady called Candice Owens. She's doing an expose about the wife of Macron. There's some things there that you might interest you. Go and check.
Was on his way to in the UK and the Brexit referendum, the AfD party in Germany, the Vox party in Spain. In 2016, they were afraid that social media, rising all of these right-wing populist parties to power, would effectively collapse the entire rules-based international order unless there was international censorship. Because Brexit would give rise to Frexit if Marine Le Pen won, and she was massively overpowered on social media versus Macron. If, as I mentioned, Italy, Germany, there was going to be not just Brexit, there's going to be Frexit, Spexit, Italexit, Brexit, Gorexit. So the entire EU would come undone, which would mean all of them.
So you can see the big picture is that all these guys are just like, this EU manenos, you want to move out. We do our own things, because actually a lot of these organizations, we are told in our heads that they're good for us, but normally it's just to congregate people together so it's easier to manage, to manage them. Tell you, no, these rules for the entire Europe here. So like even if it doesn't suit you, you have to make adjustments to follow whatever they want. And even if it's totally going to destroy your country, you have to follow. So Britain came out. People are saying it's going to collapse. How do you collapse when you've left a corrupt institution? You can deal with your own corruption.
NATO would come undone, which would mean there's no enforcement arm for the
NATO.
IMF or the World Bank or international creditors. Which would mean it would be like the ending scene of Fight Club, where the credit card company buildings all collapse just because you're allowed to shitpost on the internet. And they talked about that quite openly in 2017 as they were creating this whole censorship infrastructure.